All right. I think we're live. This is the first time we're doing this, so I'm kind of getting oriented here, getting my chat set up and everything together. But thank you all so much for attending. We're super excited about Fellow version 3, and there's a lot of other stuff that's also coming very, very soon. And unfortunately, some of them relied on some external partners that we're working with. So there are a bunch more announcements that are coming. So the next few weeks are actually going to be quite eventful as well. So that is, there's a lot of things that we're excited to share with you. And it's going to be quite an eventful year here at Fellow. So very excited about all of that. I'm super excited to jump into questions. I know there's been a lot of questions that have gone into the chat on the actual live event. And so I'm going to answer a bunch of other questions that are getting thrown in here. But to kick things off, I'm just going to start with some of the questions that we had in the chat section in the previous video. So, the first question was around, do you see Fellow being useful for managing official board meetings, for voting, document linking, and et cetera? So we use Fellow for our own board meetings, and it's quite useful for a number of reasons. One is you just get the history of all the board meetings in one place, especially for a board meeting where you're meeting maybe once a quarter. It's hard to remember all the things that were discussed. And yes, there are meeting minutes, but the official minutes of a board meeting tend to be very, formatted in a specific way, and maybe they just don't have enough detail. But with Fellow, you just have the ability to figure out like all the different conversations that happen, the action items that were taken. So we tend to actually have use Fellow, but we also have meeting minutes, which we also attach, which are more like the official meeting minutes. But for some things like voting, now with our new reactions feature, you can actually do voting in those meetings. You have the ability for board members to be able to actually insert comments. So that's going to be a really useful feature as well. So we definitely see it being used and definitely use it ourselves. I understand that for some, board meetings, it's very, very workflow oriented. So it might not meet all of the use cases, but I do think for the vast majority of meetings that happen at companies or nonprofits or organizations, I think it's a terrific add. The other thing that we're doing is we're also adding, we typically add our board members as guest users. So they log in, they're able to collaborate. And now with the launch of the public links, you can actually use that as well. So let's go to the next question from the previous chat, and then I'll start to answer some of the questions that are in this chat here. So one of the other questions was for note locking. Who has the ability or inability to lock notes? Again, like we center around the person who owns the stream or the organizer. So that is the person that has the ability to do that. Now, as an administrator, you have this extra superpower. So if you are the workspace admin, you also have the ability to go into the administrator settings and actually set that notes get locked after a certain amount of time by default. So that's a pretty powerful feature. So if you just wanted to kind of implement a policy across your whole organization to say that, meeting notes are going to be locked after, say, 24 hours, that's a thing that you can do. And as Alexander was showing, you can still go do some things like check things off or add some reactions, but the bulk of the actual content of the meeting doesn't change. And we talked about it in the sense of using this for board meetings, but other places where you can see this can be used is for, say, one-on-ones, right? Like that's another place where you might want some of that content there. We kind of hesitated in launching this feature for a long time. And the reason was we always have version history in Fellow. So you can always go back and see the version history and who has done different things in the past. And so we kind of thought that audit log was good. But what we understood was a lot of people were accidentally maybe changing things. And so the combination of that plus that extra relief of knowing that you can lock things was part of the rationale for doing that. So with that said, let me run through some of the the other questions here. So Ahmed Noman is saying, in a meeting, if a point comes up to be discussed with another team in a different meeting, can adding a talking point in the current meeting be moved to another meeting using a shortcut? So that's a really great question. And I don't know how many of you actually know this, but if you add an action item on the side of the action item, right where you can now add comments and reactions, the kebab menu, there is an option called copy to. So what I typically do is if I'm in a meeting and what happens is I get oftentimes I'll be in a one-on-one and someone will say something like, hey, can you make sure that so-and-so make sure to do this, or don't forget to ask so-and-so about this. So often what I'll do is I'll add an action item and then I'll press copy to, and then I will copy to that action item to the one-on-one, say, that I have with that person, or that group meeting that I'm going to be in with that person. So now the meeting gets linked on both sides. And what's cool about that is now when I go to the other meeting, I don't have to use my memory to remember this. The action item is just going to be there. And when I check it off there, it's also going to be checked off in the first place. So this is a super powerful feature. We have talked about replicating this for talking points as well. But for the time being, what you can do is you can just you can highlight the talking point, change it to an action item, and then you can use the copy to function. So that's a thing that you can do with respect to that. Okay. Will you have the ability to add custom emojis and reactions? I think so. I think custom emojis are awesome. Obviously, we wanted to launch quickly with this one, but there's going to be a lot of additional things that come and a lot of refinements. Our philosophy is typically we launch the features as sort of like minimum viable products that work and address the primary use case. But then we actually listen to users. So if you ever message us on Intercom or you use the voting feature we have built right into the product in the help center, we actually listen to this stuff and we go and we tally what people are saying and we understand the use cases. So yeah, Kevin, thank you for asking. And totally, I see that as something coming up. And there will be a lot of sort of enhancements to all of the features that you've seen today too. So the other question, let's see what else is there. Okay, so it says that, so this is from Sab, and it says it'd be really nice to have the option to assign an action item to multiple people, and also people who are not part of the meeting. So it's funny that you ask that. This is a very interesting tool, and I'll kind of give you a behind the scenes version answer to this. So assigning to multiple action items, the way that we currently handle this right now internally is if something needs to be done by more than one person, we'll basically, like you said, Sab, like you can tag multiple people. Ultimately, there is one owner of the action item. But you can definitely tag multiple people. And if you tag multiple people, every time you tag someone, Fellow will send a notification. So that's part one. Part two is, I know some people have been asking for making it easier and faster to assign things to multiple people. Sometimes what you can do is you can just copy and paste the same action item and then change the assignee and give it to multiple people. The tricky part about this, and one of the considerations, and we're always open to your ideas, so please let us know what you think. But one of the challenges is because we integrate with all these different tools like an Asana or a Jira, a lot of these other tools don't allow for you to assign to multiple people. And because we're building more and more integrations, this is one of the challenges that we've been thinking about. And so one of the things that's made this task of like building that feature in a little bit more a lot more thought needs to go into it. But it's certainly something. It's one of the features that we've been asked about a lot. So I definitely see us doing more in that area. But again, this is one of the considerations that we just have to understand, that like if you are going to integrate Fellow with many other tools, that this is a consideration. Oh, on assigning things to people outside the meeting. That's actually a thing that we have been talking about. And it almost made it into this release. I will tell you that. So that is something in the background that we're working on. And one of our, and here's part of the rationale for that, right? So we don't think that every single person in your company should attend every single meeting. And one of the ways that you can do that is, by making sure that there's a core audience, but sometimes obviously things come up for other people. And others shouldn't have to be there for the whole meeting just so that they can get this one action item. So we are working on something called Assign to Anyone. There are some considerations. It's not very far. So I do see that as being something that we do launch in the near future. So one question from Bethan is, it would be nice to output, it would be nice to output all of the meeting minutes into a document. So I don't know if you knew this, but in any meeting, you can actually, if you scroll to the top right, let me figure out what the name of the button is. But yeah, if you just click on more actions in any meeting, if you're a G Suite user, there is the option to export something as a Google Doc. You can export your whole stream, and a stream is just a string of notes back to back. You can export the whole thing, and so that's a feature that's already available. We also released a print function, and the print function is another thing. It's going to print the whole stream, and so you could click on the print function still in the more action section. And if you do that, then it will export the whole thing as a PDF. So that's actually another thing, Bethan, that you might want to take a look at. And okay, so so one of the questions was around having action items in multiple places. So again, over the long term, what we see Fellow doing is integrating with more and more tools. We currently have Zapier as a tool that you can use in between Fellow and other tools. So you can export action items, send them to Zapier, and Zapier can send them to the other tools. But over the course of time, we'll integrate with more and more of these products natively. We always want to have a really powerful action item section within Fellow. So you will see our action items improving. It's not going to be something that's going to stay the way it is. We have lots of plans for it. They're going to get more advanced, more powerful. We're going to build a lot more features. But again, we're never going to go be a project management tool. That's not the intent of Fellow. Our intent is for all the very basic needs around action items and managing your teams and action items for meetings or recording decisions. Like those are the things that we want to be very easily kept in Fellow. And of course, like in smaller companies, people might use Fellow for everything. And, that's a use case that we see, but we're never going to go out and build, a product as sophisticated as Jira, for example, within Fellow. So I think you'll see our integrations continuing to improve for people who want to integrate more, but we'll keep making our action items better as well. So let's see another question. Yes, so from Nikos, will we see the meetings load faster? That is a really good question. So what you will notice in this new Fellow version, we didn't really talk about it very explicitly, but you'll notice that sometimes now when you click on one meeting and then you go back to the previous meeting, you'll notice that is going to start to load instantly. And so we're starting to do a lot of performance tweaks in the background. There's going to be a lot of effort going into this, in our next release cycle. So I think you're going to see a lot of this improving radically. So Fellow is a tool that people use on the hour. The people who use Fellow, who have a lot of meetings, like they're in Fellow throughout the day, and every microsecond that is added, in clicking from one event to another across our whole user base, this is something that we're monitoring, and we've spent we didn't really talk about this in the release, but we've spent a lot of time creating tools within the product so that we can measure load times across the board and we can measure performance. So we've done a lot of instrumenting in the background, and using those things, I think you're going to see all of these things improving quite, in quite a big way over the next little while. You'll see some of it in Fellow 3.0 as soon as the features go live, but a lot more is coming. We care a lot about this, and so it's definitely something that we want Fellow to be one of the fastest products that you use. Part of it is that, I guess a consequence of our own success, there have been a lot more users on the platform, and things are growing very fast. And so it's been a struggle a little bit to keep up with that, but we're doubling down, adding resources, and we're going to keep making that better. So integration with Outlook as a standalone, we're starting to work with a lot of bigger companies. Right now, at least for the immediate term, we're still very focused on Office 365 and G Suite as calendar providers. But again, as we're starting to work with larger and larger companies where that might not be an option, this is something that we're talking about, but very candidly, it's not in our short-term roadmap. But again, it's something that we do get asked for often, and something that we do consider. So are you planning to add OKRs as a first-class concept? And if so, when? Thank you for Seguno Software for asking that question. So here's how we think about OKRs, goals, decisions, action items, and all these things. We really think about Fellow as we think about Fellow as a meeting productivity platform and team management tool. So we lead with meetings, but we extend into managing your team. And so part of the considerations as part of that are, how can we make it so that all of your meetings are like delightful experiences? We have this saying at Fellow, make meetings delightful for everyone. And so part of that is really digging into, what do people actually discuss during meetings? And some of those things are covered within Fellow. There's talking points and action items, which are kind of first-class citizens. We integrate with many other tools. If you're a developer and you use Jira, or you're a product manager and use Jira, you can now bring in some of those items natively into the product, because what do you talk about during meetings? You might talk about tickets that are referenced in other tools, and if you check them off in Fellow, they get checked off in other places. But other things that people talk about are, things like goals, or, for example, we do our design review meetings, and, we use Figma as a tool, and we love it. And so a lot of times in our design review meetings, we're talking about Figma documents. So I think, without spilling the beans too much here, we look at all of these other functions, and our view is that some of the things that you do most often within meetings, we will build some of those functions in natively within the product. We have some very basic goal setting elements in Fellow today, but we are thinking very actively and working on making that a much more robust and sort of standalone offering. Again, we think that to the extent that these things help your meetings run better, those are things that we should consider investing more in as resources within Fellow. So that's kind of how we think about it. I think you'll like what you'll see in that area. It is something that we're working on, but I don't want to reveal too many things ahead of time. But it should be really cool. Ross Rader, thank you for asking. So we wanted you to all come to this event, right? We didn't want you to get the features and then see the explanation afterwards. So the features are coming. We're going to roll it out before the end of the week. You might start seeing it in different batches, but we expect everything to be live by the end of the week. Okay, let's see. Okay, so from Marcel, seems my question was missed. Any plans to expand collapse features so that a heading of a topic / point can be shown, but the rest is collapsed, so things don't get unwieldy? This is a great question. And Marcel, we do these hackathons at the company. And so, fun fact: this feature was actually semi-built in a hackathon. So this is something that we are thinking about, and we have kind of like internal prototypes that we've been working on. And from a product development standpoint, the way we think about this is we think about it as a user delight feature, which is, again, like, to make your meetings delightful. It's a very important feature. One thing that I've noticed in our meetings, so one cool thing about the way we do things at Fellow is that everybody's on production environment, so all of our users, and then we are on our staging environment. And so we get to play with a lot of features ahead of time. So we will play with things, and then sometimes we might say, you know what, like this doesn't actually work, cancel that feature, or we'll work with very early versions of things. So let me tell you about what I've been noticing in working with this new feature we just launched, which is comments. Comments actually start to make your meeting agenda like length actually start to make it smaller. And the reason is that, like, you'll notice that whereas before you were writing things underneath talking points, now people are going to start adding comments. And so this threading ability is actually going to make your meeting agendas and notes basically a lot more collapsed. So I think this will help, but I also agree with you that, like, that's not alone going to make it as great as being able to collapse items. Other considerations are, when you collapse items, can you like drag multiple items up and down? So these are things we've been talking about. We have prototypes, so definitely things that we're working on, but we don't have a specific target date. But it's really good to know it's something that you care about, and that definitely adds a lot of weight. Let's see. So from Joel Reed, Joel, thank you for joining. Always love chatting with you. One fun thing is, and feel free to do this. Joel always sends me these videos of using the product and things he's running into and suggestions. And Joel, so like, I literally forward that to probably half the company, and so we post it in Slack channels and we discuss it. So this stuff means a lot. So thank you for doing that. I agree with you. So what you've noticed about goals, and again, just going back to the concept of like making goals a part of every meeting, because in a lot of meetings, depending on the type, what are you doing? You're discussing goals to begin with. And so in one-on-ones, we have the ability for you to reference something we call priorities, but really that's just goals. And so if you're in a marketing staff meeting, it's not crazy to think that you would often discuss KPIs and goals, right? And so there's multiple ways that we're going to address that. Part of which is with native development, which you're going to see in the next little while. Part of which is also with integrations. So it's something that we're definitely thinking about. And again, like in the next few months, I think you're going to see some really good features there. Let me talk about the daily planner. I see Jennifer is asking a question on that. So here's the thing about the daily planner. I use Fellow for probably more things than most people do. But so the daily planner for me is a super useful feature. Basically what it is it's just a Fellow stream. And in Fellow, everything is a stream, right? Meetings are streams, one-on-ones are streams. A stream is just this thing that we've come up with, which is like a series of notes kind of like tied together. You can scroll down and see the history of everything. So you can create streams that are not tied to events. And that's what my daily planner is, which you may have seen in the demo. And so all I do is like, I use a template and then I write down all the things I need to do. I have like a next section, a priority section, a backlog, and so on and so forth. And then what I do is, if I'm in a meeting and someone gives me an action item, sometimes what I'll do is I'll use the copy to feature, and then I'll add it to my daily planner. So this way I have multiple places where I see the action item. So I'll go into a recurring meeting before it actually happens and read the action items and maybe do those things there. But I can also add really important things into my daily planner. So, fun fact, I don't know if you noticed this in the demo, but you had access to my calendar. And I even use Fellow for I do date nights with my wife. And so we actually use Fellow to keep track of all the things to talk about there too. So you can use Fellow for a lot more than it's basically intended for. But obviously the core of what we're trying to do is make sure that meetings are delightful for everyone. And so I don't want to keep everybody way over. So I know we're a little past time. So I just wanted to say thank you to our users, our supporters. You are the reason why we do this, and like every comment or feedback or words of encouragement we receive from you makes all the difference. And to the whole team at Fellow, all of the fellows as we call them. This is all. I mean, we're able to do all of these things because of them. So a big shout out and thank you to all the fellows at Fellow who made today possible. And without further ado, we'll kind of end the event here. But keep an ear out for a bunch of other announcements that are coming in the next few weeks. There's a lot of exciting things. We didn't get to fit them all in Fellow version 3, but I think you're going to like what you see. Thank you all again. And I will see you all at the next launch event.